So I just finished watching the newest episode of Tokyo Ghoul on Funimation, and that ending, it looks like it's about to happen. We're about to finally see the Black Reaper in anime form. I gotta admit, I'm pretty excited to see how it's done. If they don't play Unravel for the Black Reaper reveal, I wouldn't be disappointed next week. But we'll see where that goes, and when we cross that bridge, we'll talk about it. But for now, though, this episode handles quite a few plot points and brushes over some things that, honestly I'm a little bit disappointed with, but at the same time, it's still a relatively decent episode. One of the big scenes or highlights of the episode, I think, is definitely the Noro stuff. When Noro was entering and he started fighting the QS, and we saw Shirazu go in, trying to fight back, using Nutcracker for the first time, the Quinque Nutcracker. I mean, that was probably one of the highlights of the episode. There was a couple other scenes that was relatively good as well, but I mean, there were some things that I do want to talk about that I think could have been done a little bit better. A scene in particular that, I was a little bit disappointed with was definitely the Faretta scene. And the reason why I was a little bit disappointed with that scene was because it lacked that subtle, mysterious atmosphere that Faretta gave off for the first time when we saw this scene in the manga. Now, don't get me wrong. I know for a fact the anime has not properly established Faretta's character, and he was, like, a very big mystery at this point in the series. He came kind of, like, out of nowhere, but at the same time, his character was shown in the second half of Tokyo Ghoul Part 1. And like I've already said many times throughout my anime reviews of Tokyo Ghoul, they skipped the second half of Part 1 TG. So, regardless if, this scene wasn't done right or not in the anime or whatever, they didn't properly show Faretta in Season 2, or Rude doesn't even count anymore. So basically, Faretta was never hinted at. So technically, if you're an anime only looking at Faretta, you're gonna be like, who the hell is this? What's going on? What meaning does this have? You're not really gonna understand the twist with this character, this little character that was behind the scenes the entire time that Toka met at a university, and then now we see that he's an investigator, and he's doing this crusty stuff, moving someone in front, and then having one of his fellow investigators just getting killed. So let's get into that scene, okay? The entirety of it, the good and the bad. So one of the reasons why I wasn't a big fan of the scene is, like I already said, the atmosphere of it I felt just didn't fit. The voice actor did a pretty good job. I'm not really disappointed in the voice acting, so to say. I'm mainly just disappointed in the presentation with the visuals, which by now, as we all know, when it comes to the reanime, the animation isn't the best. It does lack in a lot of areas, and that's because of outsourcing. It's common sense. But at the same time, the story has been relatively good. They have tried to adapt to everything they possibly can in the little amount of time they have. But basically, though, I was a little bit disappointed with how Faretta's animation was done when he, grabbed, his fellow investigator, moved him in front, or how he ran over to, Matsu and stabbed her right in the eyes. I felt like just the way that scene was depicted, it was just done way better in the manga. But that's just my personal feeling there. But anyways, I do say that I was pretty shocked with how violent that scene was. Like, when you saw how he stabbed her eyes, and I figured that was going to be heavily censored, but it wasn't. And I mean, when he started, chainsawing her, and you see the blood effect pop up, I'm like, yo, that's pretty brutal. So, I mean, we get to see, the sudden twist of this character Faretta that popped out of nowhere that is relatively strong. Because, I mean, he manhandled an investigator, moved him over with just one hand, and you can even see amongst Matsu what she was doing. He actually deflected her Kagane with just his hand. Like, he just brushed it aside, which shows how strong he is. He is not a relatively weak person. He is definitely not normal by any means. So it makes you wonder, who is this dude? What's going on here? Why is he acting like he is? Is he good? Is he bad? What's happening? But that's the big thing. His personality definitely shifted in that scene. I think anime only is going to be able to catch up on that because, I mean, number one, because of how he treated his fellow investigators, but also he walked on Kijima's body. He literally stepped on the man's body to get over to Matsu and then poke her in the eye. So, yeah, just FYI if you didn't notice that scene. But anyways, though, let's talk about Kijima. So Kijima, he died. And I was very, very impressed with his scene. I honestly figured it was going to be censored, heavily censored, because of how his scene was in the manga. I mean, in the manga, it was still a lot more violent, it showed a lot more, but it still got the major point across with what happened to Kijima. I mean, the chainsaw fell from the roof, and then it started literally filleting his head. You just see how it was going in his head and all that, splitting it in half, and he was shaking and rocking, which I think it was as good as the manga, obviously, because of censorship, but like I said, I do not blame the series for censorship. That is not their fault entirely. That's just laws in Japan. But just seeing how the man was shaking back and forth, and when you saw the blood and stuff, and when the man fell over, he got impaled, hit through, the arm, and then the stomach and all that, I felt relatively it was a good scene. They definitely tried to stick as close to the original material as possible with Kijima, and I think that was a really good job for, his character to go out, and I think it was very brutal and violent. And I especially love that they kept in his iconic line, "I want cheese." Now, I know many are going to be saying, what the hell? Like, why do you say "I want cheese"? Well, there's a lot of speculations and theories about this, and symbolism about why Kijima was saying "I want cheese," and there's quite a few stuff out there, but one of the simpler, theories of why he said "I want cheese" is probably because when his brain was getting cut in half, most likely his mind started going crazy, and he just probably started thinking of food or something, or just cheese popped up or something, I don't know. But I mean, if your brain's getting sawed in half, obviously, you're not going to be able to have probably complete sentences, or, you're not going to say, really coherent stuff, and that's pretty much what happened to Kijima when his head was getting split open, and that's why he said, "I want cheese." I'm just very impressed that was actually kept in, so, job well done, Studio Clown. I'm pretty impressed. But here's the scene that disappointed me, and that would be the way Haru went out. Now, Haru, she obviously, in the anime version, she hasn't really been around that long, and even in the manga, she wasn't really around that long either. But with the manga, it felt like she was around for at least a lot longer than the anime feels, because the anime compresses multiple chapters, like 5 to 6 chapters per episode, and it can be pretty rushed in a lot of parts. It skips a few minor details here and there, but it does get the major point across to what is going on in the series, so that's why I haven't really been that upset with it. But the whole Haru stuff in this episode is definitely something that kind of made me a little bit sad, because the impact of it wasn't the same. Number one, because of censorship, and I want to clarify for you anime because you probably don't really know what even happened to Haru, since it was censored, at the very least what I saw. Her head was completely cut off. It was completely dislocated, completely cut off, and flew off. And so, that is why a couple episode reviews back, I made a joke. It's she's got a nice head on her shoulders or whatever. That's the reason why I made that joke, is because she was going to get her head completely cut off, and it was censored. You didn't really get to see it, which, like I said, I don't blame, Tokyo Ghoul Re's anime for it, the, Studio Clown for making that episode, or this episode, because, I mean, censorship happens. But not even counting the censorship reasons, I just think the way Haru's character was showcased in the anime, it felt very short, and I don't think anime-onlys had a lot of time to really build a bond with her or connect at all with Haru. And then throwing on top the fact that not many anime-onlys are really going to know what the Sunlit Garden is and how she's connected to Arima, they're really not going to care too much about that little flashback that was in that scene when she died. But let's kind of give some context to that. So there's this Sunlit Garden that raises these children, and that's kind of where Arima came from, and where, Haru came from. They were a part of this Sunlit Garden, they have a history together, and that's kind of what that flashback was basically showcasing, is that there was definitely something similar between these two characters, and in the manga, it was better represented that Haru was taking a similar stance as how Arima was doing. For instance, when Arima, at the end of Part 1 Tokyo Ghoul, when he was fighting Eto, he was actually standing in a similar way with his, Quinkei, with electricity coming out of it. If you ever seen the manga, or if you remember the ending of Route A, you'll remember how he used electricity type, Quinkei. Well, it's kind of the equivalent to that. Basically, the Haru scene in this episode was to parallel with Arima from Part 1 TG to show that they have similar fighting styles to the way they used their stance while fighting ghouls, and that showed that they definitely had a deeper connection growing up. But that was pretty much, what you should get from that flashback. I'm not going to go any further because of spoiler reasons, but I mean, I think just Haru in general, I think the anime should have tried to focus more on her, but I guess it's just because of the way the pacing is, many might not just be able to grow bonded with her because of just how quick she was just now written out of the series. Now, speaking of other characters, I guess let's get into Noro. So Noro's scene, like I already said, is probably the highlight of the episode for me, because animation department, it looked very impressive. I especially love the, like, color palette and the effects of Noro's Kagane when you saw it coming out of him and all that, especially when you see him reattaching his body. It was very gruesome, very jarring. It's definitely something you have not seen from Tokyo Ghoul yet, and so I felt like they did that scene with justice. They definitely went all in. Like, if any scene that I'm glad they went all in for, it was definitely that scene, because it was relatively important, and it is very important for the story of Tokyo Ghoul, so I am very pleased with that. But basically, Noro's regeneration. Let's talk about that for a second. So, for a long time now, if you were a manga reader, let's say you read Part 1 Tokyo Ghoul, you know for a fact Noro's always been this mysterious character. In the original Tokyo Ghoul, when Anteiku went to raid Ogiri Tree and save Kaneki, we got our first true glimpse at Noro as a character, and Noro actually tanked what, Uta, Tsukiyama, and all of them did. And he just walked away like it was pretty much nothing. And it was always speculated that Noro was very strong and there was something off about him. And we always saw Noro very close to Eto. He was always nearby Eto at the very early stages of the series. And so many wonder what was their connection. And with this, chapter, when it came out, and now this episode, many were like, what's going on here? We have never really seen a ghoul showcase this level of regeneration. For instance, we have never seen a ghoul be able to be split in half, reform again. That's just not something you would see at all. Especially when a ghoul gets their head cut off, and then you see how they expand out with another Kagane-like structure that attacks everybody around them, which that's what happened in the scene. And basically, many would be questioning, like, what's happening here? Why is Noro a little bit different from the normal ghoul that we have seen? Because, like, we see a couple of ghouls in this episode that get cut in half, but they still die. Well, Noro is a complete exception. And then that's another scene, which is Karen, and Karen, she is actually someone that gets her head chopped off, but it comes back down and reconnects. And if you kind of look at point A and point B, like you compare these two scenes, Noro and what happened to Karen, you can see that there is something that links these two characters. Number one, they have been shown to be around Eto. For instance, Noro's always been hanging around Eto, and Karen recently was, like, captured by Eto and then tortured. And we know Eto did something. Yev, Karen, something, a rib. Remember, that was, like, the biblical symbolism in the last episode. And so, at this point in time, it's not really a spoiler, it's speculated that Eto did something to their body to make it to where they're a lot different, where she basically turned them into, like, a detachable Kagane in some way, or, somehow is having it to where she's able to regen them with her Kagane. That's what many was speculating at this time in the series, and it's not necessarily a spoiler, it's just common sense when you look at the details that this episode provided. So, yeah, and also if you know about Part 1 Tokyo Ghoul, obviously. I mean, if you've only watched the anime, you're not really going to understand, and I guess this is considered a spoiler, but like I said, you should be reading the manga. We get to see the first display of Nutcracker. Nutcracker's Quinque and all that, what Shirazu uses, and the Quinque is incredibly OP. It like expands out and then comes back in and all that, and it blows up everything in its radius. It's an incredibly strong Quinque, and you can see that its utility is pretty impressive, and so this is definitely going to be something that, could easily overpower ghouls in the future. I mean, even though it didn't do the death blow to Noro and kill him in this episode, it's very apparent that that Quinque is by no means no joke. It's a high-level Quinque, but when you compare it to something like the laser-like Quinque you saw coming off of Hairu, what she was using, I guess it's not in the same ballpark. But at the very least, though, Nutcracker's Quinque is pretty OP, especially what it did to someone like Noro that can regen like he can. I mean, if that would have been any other ghoul, they would have been dead right then and there. Now, anyways, I guess let's also talk about Psycho's Kagane. So we get to see our first glimpse of Psycho's Kagane. I want to point something out for you, you anime-onlys, and also for you manga readers if you've forgotten as well. But, Psycho's Kagane, it looks a lot like a fungus, and it was symbolism for, like, this fungus that was established earlier on in Tokyo Ghoul Re, which the anime did cut out. We didn't actually get to see it, but there was supposed to be this fungus scene where Kaneki was talking, or Sasuke was talking to Kaneki within his mind, and when they were talking about fungus, and then we got to see an image of it, and the Kagane we saw from Psycho in this episode was supposed to look exactly like the fungus that Kaneki was talking about, which, leads to a lot of speculation. What could this be? mean? Does this mean that maybe, she has a similar Kagane to Kaneki, or why does her Kagane look like that? There was a lot of speculation at that time, but many realized that her Kagane looked like, fungus, so nobody really knew what was going on there. So I just wanted to point that one out too, if you're unaware. So Tsukiyama, he is going through a lot of problems right now. Obviously, he's lost his father, he's lost his main household, now he's losing, like, his childhood friends and family left and right. This man is losing all of his loved ones, and when you make the parallels, you could see that what Karen went through in the past when her family was executed and taken down, it's now what is happening to Tsukiyama. He's losing everybody while his family's trying to protect him and get him out of there before he could carry on the family legacy. And there's a big connection there. So basically, Karen, she's also of, like, royal blood, while Tsukiyama, he's of royal blood, and it's being built up basically to show that they're very similar origins of what's happening to Tsukiyama right now. But the man, basically, he talks to Sasuke in a way that kind of shows that this man is maturing as a person. He's like Mr. Sasuke. He doesn't call Sasuke by Kaneki, what he's been doing in previous episodes. He calls him Mr. Sasuke, basically establishing the fact that, look, I don't know you, and, at the same time, I'm just telling you right now, I'm here to get away because I need to carry on the legacy of my family, what they, wanted me to do. Basically, he's like, if I try to fight you and all that, and I die, I fell them. I'll make all their deaths and sacrifices in vain. It would be for nothing. And that's basically what Tsukiyama was doing. Why he was fighting Sasuke was because he knew for a fact, even if he had to fight his best friend or a friend he deeply admires, he needs at the very least uphold what his family believes in. So he's willing to kill his own friend to be able to protect his family. So it shows kind of the line that was drawn and how Tsukiyama is willing to go that far if it means, carrying on his family's legacy. So it was a very sad moment. He had to choose between his friend or family on who he wants to save. And right now he's choosing his family and why he's fighting Kaneki. In that final segment, when he actually grabs Kaneki's leg while on the ground, I felt like that scene was very powerful in the manga, and it definitely did a good job in the anime as well. And you see how, like, Kaneki was like, I feel very emotional and all that. Like, I feel very unhappy. And you just can see by the man's expression, he's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know. This is just something that seems completely awful. Because, regardless of if you're a ghoul or not, if you look at these two individuals and you look at the situation, you realize that Tsukiyama, what's happening to him is pretty freaking awful. It's kind of like, losing all of your loved ones left and right, and then you don't know what else to do. You either try to fight, or you get captured, or, you die, one or the other. And that's basically why Kaneki was so upset. He's like, this is sad, because, their connection, how Karen is trying to protect Tsukiyama, how Tsukiyama's trying to protect her, but also get away. Just, yeah, it's a lot of, conflict going on, and just makes you truly upset. But, that's pretty much it when it comes to this week's episode. There's some minor details here and there, but relatively the episode, I think, did an okay job. There were some things I think could have been done better, obviously. Like the whole, Shimoguchi stuff. Shimoguchi, they got this point across with that scene. I think it was good. But once again, the big problem I had with the Shimoguchi stuff was the art and animation. And like I said, I guess that's, what, we need to lose if we're going to have a good, story adaptation. But, Shimoguchi scene, if it would have had better art animation and, camera angles, I think that could have been even more emotional than it already was. Because, as you know, Shimoguchi, he lost his entire squad. And, he was, kind of a jerk to Kaneki in the QS, and he kept losing everybody, and nobody really wanted to squad up with him. And then these two girls, they decided to squad up with him, and he just didn't want him around because he didn't want to watch him die either and continue to live on. And now he just had to watch two squad members that, joined him recently, and also he tried to run off and, say he hated them. They knew that he was lying and tried to die for him, which they did, and, we saw what happened. So, it's pretty sad what happened in that scene, and I just, I wish it was done a little bit better with the art and animation and all that. There might be a scene cut out from that. I don't know. I know there's more to Shimoguchi, like the Shimoguchi scene. I remember it, but I don't want to talk about it unless it's going to be showcased in the next episode. But there might be something cut out with the Shimoguchi scene, not showcasing the entire event of what happened to him, but like I said, I'll save my thoughts on that until next week, because they could potentially add it in, or I could be, misremembering events. But I'll end this video here. I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, I love you guys. Chibi out.